Hello, everyone.
Hey guys!
Welcome to the Beyond the Surface podcast. I'm Snezondo.
And I'm Sisipo. Oh my gosh, I feel like we haven't done this in a very long time.
It's been a hot minute.
But anyway, before we get things going, first and foremost, we are on Instagram at
Beyond the Surface pod.
and YouTube.
Beyond the Surface podcast. Please like, comment,
Follow,
subscribe.
And thank you so much for the engagement we're getting. I think I was noticing that we should actually, respond more to your messages. And we're sorry about that. We do see them, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your support. Anywho, today's topic.
Inzim. As always. What is new?
Adulting. We're talking about adulting.
Is it adulting or adulting?
I think pronunciation, there's no such thing. So
all right.
as long as you catch the meaning. Adulting, however you prefer, it's difficult anyway.
It's hard.
It's one of those, you remember when you were young? I feel like when I was young, I couldn't wait.
To be an adult.
Grown up.
Yeah.
Because I felt like it looked like so much freedom, and it is, but the responsibility, I think, of that freedom is what I didn't think about.
To whom much is given, much is required. And the older you get, much is required.
I think sometimes too much is required. But anyway, here we are.
Yeah, to be honest, I want to say I never signed up for this. This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for a fancy car, a fancy job, cute husband, and lovely kids. What I'm living.
And the white picket fence.
This is not. Dreams were sold and lies were told. Because when I think about my life, honey, it was honestly thinking back to, I think, at 18, I don't think in terms of being an adult, that's where I kind of felt it. I think that when I left university, that's when
the real world
started getting tricky.
Yeah.
It started getting tricky for me.
I think I'm like this type of person. I'm a gradual type of thing. I don't like to rush and overwhelm myself.
Yeah.
But I mean, even though, and I was even thinking about it, the way in which I approach the stage of my life that I'm in right now.
Yes.
Which is very chaotic, but I'm literally trying to hold on to whatever calm I can.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to spiral out of control.
I am spiraling, honey. To be honest, starting today, it's been a spiral. Because I'm spinning. And I'm like, when can I stop?
I know exactly. That's exactly what I'm avoiding.
I'm
right?
spiraling.
I do not want to spiral. But I think what I was just trying to understand about being an adult is that really there is no formula.
There isn't.
And that's where I wanted to start this discussion, right? I think because we look at each other so much and when you look at your friends, you look at your relatives, family members, and how they basically try to manage and cope being an adult. I think there's no one way of doing it. And, problems, we all have them. Struggles, we all have them. Trials, we all have them. Difficulties, all of that, right? And it's really just trying to also manage yourself at the same time.
Yes.
But also while trying to show up. And that's the thing about being an adult.
Yeah.
Is that you always have to show up. Not necessarily also only for others, but for yourself.
True.
So it's this responsibility that you have in the midst of chaos and difficulties. Is that you have to prioritize your happiness, your joy, your fun times, being productive, working, trying to make a living, family, being a friend.
Self-care.
All of these things. It's a huge to-do list that you didn't even ask for. You don't even, it's just there.
Can we just get to taxes? You know what I mean? On that, it's just there's admin.
Yes.
And there's admin for each and every one of those categories that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and you can't just like just be passive.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Being an adult, like you're just required to be present in all things at all times.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can juggle obviously by level of priority, but you know, when you sort of like drop the ball, it's just like sometimes it rolls and you may never get it back. And that's the thing.
True.
And that's the hard thing about it, because you never. It's like, okay, do I let this go? Do I hold on?
You kind of have to have a grip on everything, and not everything requires a tight grip, but you need to have a grip on everything. And I think that's the hard thing, right? Is that there's all these priorities and all these things that are coming at you that you kind of are responsible for.
Yeah.
And are going to be held accountable for.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? I feel like one thing I've learned about being an adult is you need answers.
Yeah.
You have to have a response.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't drop work and think, it's fine. Someone will pick it up. No, you will have to account for what you've done.
Yes.
You know, in your relationships, you will have to account for every single thing that you do. And with your finances and everything, you have to be accountable for those things. Because as an adult, just managing your finances is just difficult.
Flames.
I'm seeing. Some months I'm just like,
what happened here?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to account for that because I'm the one that goes back and I look at my savings, I look at my emergency fund, I look at this and I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, clearly we've missed the mark this month.
Yeah.
And how do I regroup? And I think it's very important to get into the habit of regrouping, whether it's with your work, whether it's with your relationships, whether it's with your finances, whatever aspect, your spiritual life. Taking stock as an adult is one thing that I've learned. And it's hard.
Yeah.
Because when you take stock, you see the nasty realities of the mistakes you've made, of the fact that you haven't prioritized certain things and you've kind of maybe dropped the ball, or you lost a bit of your grip on something.
Yeah.
But it's very important as an adult to be able to be accountable and to actually respond to the things that you do, because you can't say I don't know.
Yeah. Or I don't know what happened. Because you are the common denominator in everything, by the way,
Exactly.
FYI. Literally. Everything points back to you.
Yeah, bo.
And so I think you're definitely right. Everything points back to you. Like you can't say, I was. No, literally, you are the one in charge. And here's also another thing. It's really just also understanding that, being self-aware, right? And also realizing that really things move when you make space for them to move. So everything really is like, it's in your control, but you're not in control, but you are in control. And so that's always a juggle. It's like realizing, yes, you are in control, but you're not in control.
It's like a hazy space, hey?
So it's like you're navigating between this very fine line, but it's very much an important line to know and to understand and to, in some ways, master. And I think for me, that's where, or I think, as millennials, we are in that journey of trying to discover who we are while we are adulting.
Yeah.
And so there are so many things that we have to unlearn, so many things that we have to learn at the same time, so many things that, we're trying to process also. So it's really just one of those, like, especially in your 20s, a very wild time.
I think also, though, what makes this a bit awkward and difficult is that I don't think that our parents adulted the same. Do you know what I mean? Their experience of adulting, well, personally for me, is quite different. Like, my parents got married quite young. They had me at a young age. And so I think their process of adulting was far more fast-tracked. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, the way I've, lived my life and structured it is such that, like, fine, I had school, and I'm now journeying through my career, but it's just like the formula or the way in which I've adulted is not the same as my parents. And so that kind of makes it a bit difficult, because for me, it's like you always look to your parents for advice or look to them as an example of how they've lived life. But I think for many millennials, I'm sure some of us can attest to the fact that, like, the way that we have adulted.
Times and are different as well.
Yeah.
So it's like they also lived in a very different system.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And we are in another different time
yes.
too. But like even with what you're saying, is that I guess it's also very relational for us as well, because even as millennials at the same age, we are going through very different things.
Yes.
Some of us, very early on get married early, or we have kids early.
The pace of
circumstances dictate sort of like how you adult. But ultimately, I think the choice of how you choose to become an adult or what kind of adult you want to be, in most cases relies or it's on you. Yeah. And so that's the challenge of like choosing, like what type of adult do I want to be? And that's such an interesting thing, because at the same time you're also learning yourself.
That's true.
Right?
And I think if there's anything with regards to sort of deciphering what kind of adult I want to be, it's recognizing that I have the choice, right?
Yeah.
And in me having the choice, I have to set boundaries.
That's such an important thing about.
Yes.
That's a key thing about.
And
being
I think
adult.
for me, I think the transition would, in terms of making my adult experience my own, is one, owning it. Do you know what I mean? In terms of work, I have to set boundaries to say, guys, this is how, for my life to function, for me to function, this is how I'm going to need things to be. And you got to coach people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. You got to teach
you know what
them.
I mean? You got to, and even with family.
Yeah.
Because families have opinions. Whatever situation that you're in, you have to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you are the one that sets the trajectory of your life. And I think with adulting, it's one of those things where it's like there are certain, expectations that are placed on you by people of where you should be and when you should get there. And that takes a boundary.
Yeah.
It takes saying, no, I'm in charge of my future. Okay, I don't want a car now. I want a car 5 years from now, because I feel like I don't need one.
Yeah.
And for me, financially, it doesn't make sense. For another person, it says, well, if you're an adult, a car is
a necessity, or you need to have it at this stage, or when you're doing this, because why don't you have it?
Or moving out of home.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? For
yeah.
someone, it's like, no, I'm going to stay at home for
and
as long as
whatever I need to.
For as long as I feel that I need to. But for somebody else, it's like, well, if you're living at home, you're not independent.
Yeah.
And so you are the one that sets the trajectory of what you want. And there's nothing wrong with whatever choice that you make, as long as it's yours.
Yeah.
And you own it.
Exactly.
And set those boundaries with people who see, have an opinion about how your life should be and how it should look. Because when you do that, I think this adult experience becomes far more difficult, because it's already difficult as it is.
Yeah.
When you choose for yourself, right? Because you have to manage all of these things that you've mentioned. How much more now when you're also managing other people's expectations and what
and their projections and their aspirations for your life.
Yeah.
It's actually what you're talking about is making me think about how really I think being connected and being true to who you are is also such a big part of being like an adult, because when you don't invest in knowing who you are and what you want, you can spend so much time just bouncing off walls, up and down, like doing things that you think you're supposed to do, but you find you actually miss out on a lot of time. You waste time. Also, there's also another thing. I'm not want to be like be pressurized by at this time, but I'm very also cognizant of like how I spend my time. Also, that's so important. It's like, how do you spend your time? What do you feed your brain with? Like,
exactly.
Do you explore? And like those are key things about being an adult, because they open your eyes and they allow you to see different perspectives. And so like also as an adult, you need to be there's no one way of living. Also,
and that's the hard thing,
and
right?
That's right. But I think you have to give yourself an opportunity to be able to see things from your view, to appreciate another person's view, but to also know who you are, right? And to walk in your path very truthfully.
Exactly. And I think what you're saying is quite key and quite important, but it requires someone to make time for that,
Yes.
And I think a lot of the time we're so caught up in living in the mundane, in the daily, that we actually, you're aware of yourself, you're aware of certain things, but what you're saying is a time of serious self-reflection and self-assessment to say, okay, this is where I am and this is where I want to go. And that takes time. You've got to make time for that.
That's true.
And I think sometimes, in this fast-paced life that we're living in, where things are happening so fast and life is so demanding and everybody wants a piece of you. It's you have to set out the time to sit down and regroup and,
take stock as well.
Exactly.
Take stock as well.
But that's a very deliberate thing. It's a very intentional thing.
That is so true.
That you need to kind of do, whether it's every 3 months or whether, I've started doing this thing where I, at the beginning of the year, I have these goals. And I go back and I'm like, okay, quarter 1, tick.
Yeah.
I do this thing with like quarter 1, quarter 2, And the other time I was like, I remember just being in the second quarter of the year and just being like, wow, I've accomplished some things. And that's like, you need to be a person that gives yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Because the way life is so demanding and every single part of your life wants a piece of you, you can feel like what you're doing means nothing. And I think that's a tough pill about being an adult. It's like you do so much and you sometimes feel like you're stuck.
It's in vain or...
or things aren't moving and your life is not progressing when actually you're making some good progress. You just need to be a person that takes the time to go back and says, tick, I've done this and this is still what I want to do. But you need to make space for that aspirational dreaming time.
It actually, that's so true. And it reminds me about, the importance of actually, taking gratitude very seriously, because gratitude forces you to reflect. It forces you to be connected, right, with things that have happened, because a lot happens. And I think in the fast-paced world that we live in, we're just forced to we move, and that's what we say. We move, and
but we
move, and it's great. But I think you need, like you say, intentionally set the time where you take a moment, just pause, right, and really just look at certain things. It's responsibility as well. And that's what I was saying. That being an adult, you really are you have no choice but to be responsible. There's no way about it. There's no way around it.
And that's a heavy weight.
It is a heavy weight in every way. Responsible for yourself, responsible for others, because we live in a community.
Responsible for your future.
Yeah.
And in being responsible for your future, that's being I need an emergency fund.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You're taking care of things that are unforeseen, and you kind of have to be a person that's always thinking about ahead, thinking about today, thinking about yesterday. It's taxing,
and still at the same time being present in the moment.
It's
taxing. It's the past, in the present, in the future, all at the same time, right? And I think but for me, the one thing that I've realized, especially as a young adult, is really making an effort to invest in myself, right? And I think while I enjoy my youth, because I've also realized, I mustn't let too much time pass by in a way that later on I'm like, what did I do?
Exactly.
Right? And so it's that balancing act.
I completely agree with you, because I think a few months ago, I think I've just gotten over this hurdle where I spent a lot of time just worrying, worrying about the future, worrying about what I have today. Is it enough for tomorrow? Worrying about all of those things. And in that worrying, I never enjoyed today.
Yeah.
And the thing that you're so worried about, when you get there, you get it. You're like, okay, well, I'm here now, and I never really enjoyed the process of getting here. And it's hard, because it's like you want to be present, you want to think about the future, but don't let those things consume you to the point where today is not enjoyable. Where you're not enjoying, like you're saying, your youth today.
Yeah.
Just because you're so consumed by adulting and the things that demand, or, the demands of being an adult, that you don't actually enjoy the present and you don't soak it up. But when you do get to that goal, you're like, yo, the journey was long, it was rough, but I enjoyed it. You didn't get there worrying the whole time.
Which is a thing that is very like common, I think, with all the pressures that we have. And like really, life is really hard.
Yeah.
It can be very unfair. It can be very cruel.
Yeah.
And like things happen, like really, really, like things do happen. But I think it's also just, you know, part of being an adult for me is accepting, you know, things, you know, for what they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, trying your best to process them as best as possible, but also remembering that, you know, things pass.
Yeah.
And you also grow and you heal and allow yourself to go through life and feel things. You know, it's not about being pretentious and like, you know,
you don't feel anything.
Yeah, I just move. It just is what it is. Like, no, it's not about that. I think being an adult is really being even responsible in the negative emotions, and even in the bad times, and just being in that and processing that. And knowing that they do pass, really they do.
You know, you're saying this, and I'm just thinking about myself, and like, you speak about acceptance, and I've had to accept that I will go through certain emotions. And I think we speak about this often on the podcast about like response versus reacting.
Yeah.
And if anything, being an adult has taught me, you don't just get to throw your toys.
No.
You don't just get to stop and have a tantrum just because life is rough. You know, you kind of just have to face it head on.
Yeah.
Feel whatever is coming, you know, but get back up.
That's true.
And equip yourself with the tools that allow you to get back up. And one thing that for me, I'll say in my adult life, therapy.
Yes. I was literally thinking about the same thing, but I was like, this should be a topic for another day because
Therapy.
It's so important.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously that's also, you know, understanding that, you know, access to therapy is not available for everyone.
True.
But like, I feel like we can talk about that in another episode. But really, I have found that a way, or whatever way you can, to really process emotions, to process certain things.
Yeah, because I think
just so.
Yeah, because I think when you spoke about acceptance, I think for me it just took me back to a time where I was flooded by so many emotions, you know, because I think the dream has always been that I'm going to get to a certain point in my life and things are just going to fall into place.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately not the reality of life, right? But that's something that I think we all have our own aha moment where you realize, okay, no, this is not how life is.
Works.
And not how it works, exactly. And so for me, I think when that moment hit me, I was hit with so many emotions. Sadness, anger, disappointment. I was happy, I was independent, but like, you know, I was hit with a lot. And processing that for me was tough. And I think I kind of just spiraled into like, you know, a low-key depression, and anxiety was heightened just because I think the flood of emotions that I felt, and also being faced with the expectations or the dreams of myself and realizing that they don't just happen.
Yeah.
Things need to sort of fall in line for things to happen. And I think the reality of that hit me hard. And like you're saying, I had to sort of accept that this is where I was. This was my reality at that point in time in my life. And I had to really, find the tools to regroup and process each emotion and accept it for what it was.
Yeah.
It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be a bit anxious. But you've got to manage those things.
That's true.
Because they can't manage you.
Exactly.
And when they manage you, you're off the rails.
Downhill. Yeah. And that is so
and
true.
It's a tough balance,
It
you know,
is.
because you're picking stuff up, you're dropping other things, you're trying to let go of this, but I've got to pick this up.
But
you
got to
know?
keep the balance.
That's what I'm trying
You
to say.
gotta keep the
That's what I'm
balance,
trying to say.
yeah.
So you don't want to drop everything all at once. You know what I mean? You don't want to have a breakdown in G, and a breakdown mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You don't a breakdown all over. You've got to kind of manage it, and not allow yourself to get to a point where you're just broken.
For me, it brings also something you mentioned earlier about self-care. And what I'm reminded about that is really, I know in social media age we glamorize it a lot.
Yeah.
We basically, it's made to seem like this lavish thing, but really for me, it's such a simple practice of taking care of your emotions.
I think that's another episode, honey.
Yeah, taking care of your body,
your mental.
and your mind, really. And that may be in the form of hanging out, with a friend who makes you feel so good about yourself, doing a small activity, right? It doesn't have to be expensive or anything. Spending time with family, whatever rejuvenates and makes you feel alive.
Yes.
That is a key thing about being an adult, because you're able to de-stress, and you're able to live. And that's a key thing about being an adult. Live, right? Because I think when you allow certain things to happen and you feel like you're not in control, that's where the anxiety and being overwhelmed and feeling powerless.
I think as you said that, I kind of just got a picture of like being in water, right? And so often we're struggling, to be above. But sometimes you just gotta go through the waves. You've just gotta dive in, and you've just gotta immerse yourself in the experience.
That's true.
And immersing yourself, you kind of enjoy the ride.
And you come out on the other side,
because you're gonna be there gasping for air, and that is exhausting.
Yeah.
But the more you just want to enjoy the ride and ride the waves, swim, live, like you're saying, experience it.
And it's an incredible experience.
And there's joy in
it.
There's so much joy in doing what you're saying, right? In saying, okay, kunzima, but this is my space. And you've got to create and find safe spaces for yourself to be, for yourself to exist.
Yes. And live.
Live.
Because life is not just about existing. Anyway, yay!
I think that's a great way to close it off.
It felt so quick, but it was such a good and important topic. But yeah.
Yeah, no, and I honestly, I'm feeling like I'm leaving this conversation also just like being like, okay, life is hard, life is tricky. I never signed up for this, but hey, I must live.
It's doable.
Amen.
Okay.
So thank you guys for tuning in. Do, as we said in the beginning, engage with us. What are your experiences as being an adult? Yeah. What challenges have you faced? What tips do you have? Please share the tips. And continue to spread the word about the Beyond the Surface podcast.
See you in the next episode.
Bye.